Assalamu Alaikum everyone. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. So my intention with this video is to ensure that single sisters know what to watch out for or look out for during a courting period while getting to know their potential husband. You might have already had your nikah and you're in that engagement period between the nikah and walima, where you class yourself as engaged but you are still technically married. Literal halal dating. These videos are directed to sisters, so all of the red flags I'll be offering will be for sisters. I've collected 10 different red flags that I think everyone should be aware of and watch out for when getting to know someone. I've tried to keep it as general as I possibly can. No, I'm not qualified in anything, I'm not an expert at all. I've known women who have ignored red flags and then they've come to regret it later. So I feel like I'm relatively confident in the content that I'm about to share in this video. So really I'm making this video to help out the younger single, not even younger, just single Muslim sisters who perhaps are too naive or inexperienced and sort of just lost on what to look out for when it comes to a potential spouse, getting to know that person, because of course everyone's going to present themselves in the best way possible when you're getting to know someone for marriage. So there are a few things that you can look out for during these talking stages. I think a lot of single sisters are swept up in the idea of having a wedding and then having a marriage and having these certain expectations that it's going to look perfect, and that just simply isn't reality. And so I kind of want to give you guys a reality check as well, because the wedding is just one day and marriage is for the rest of your life, inshallah. You don't go into a marriage thinking you'll be divorced one day. You go into a marriage thinking that this is the person that I'm going to spend my life with and go on to have children with. Since becoming a mother, the importance of choosing the right spouse has been highlighted even further. Your future husband, inshallah, will be the father to your children, inshallah, one day. So of course it's your choice who you marry, and at the end of the day you're going to be in a relationship with this person. However, your children do not get a choice on who their father is, so it's extremely important that you choose wisely. You really don't want to settle for somebody and ignore their red flags and later come to regret the decision and time wasted with this person because you've ignored things that you were worried about but you just never addressed. I won't go into the basics of how you shouldn't marry a cheater or you shouldn't marry a liar or even someone with bad hygiene, because those are just too basic of a requirement. So my first red flag would be a man who is not God-fearing and who has low iman. Before you get at me, hold on, let's split this into two. So a man who is not God-fearing, by this I mean, does he drink? Does he have female friends? Does he think having a girlfriend is an issue? Does he smoke? Does he see there being an issue with any of these things? As a Muslim, you should be marrying somebody who is God-fearing. So sort of questions you want to ask. First, you need to know, does he fulfill the basic requirements of a Muslim? Does he pray his 5 daily prayers? Does he fast? Is he charitable? Basically, does he complete his 5 pillars of Islam? Does he pray Jummah at the masjid? Does he seek knowledge? How does he seek knowledge? Does he read the Quran regularly? Does he treat his family well? Is he charitable towards people, especially his family? Like, what does he do to actively better himself as a Muslim? Is he focused on short-term dunya goals as opposed to long-term akhirah goals? Like, what is it about him? Is he God-fearing? You need to look at his friends. Who is he close to? Who does he associate himself with? How did he approach you from the beginning of the marriage talks, if you want to call them? Did he approach you in a respectful manner? Like, how did he conduct himself with you when you first met? All of these things come into telling you whether or not this man is a God-fearing man. As a Muslim woman, you need a man, a strong Muslim man, who is going to be able to guide the both of you towards Allah and towards each other. On the flip side, you want to completely avoid somebody who has a lot of knowledge but is extremely arrogant with this sort of knowledge. And what I mean by this is somebody who has learnt a lot, they have a lot of Islamic knowledge, but they belittle you in how much they know, and they think that you're almost too stupid to understand anything to do with the religion. They might think that because they know more than you, then they can treat you in a certain way, and ultimately Islam becomes a weapon for them to use. Also linked to this, you don't want someone who is only aware of their own rights in a marriage when it comes to the roles and responsibilities of a husband and a wife. You need somebody who knows both sides of the coin and who will be fair and just. If you have met somebody who has some of these qualities, then I would take that as a red flag. What I meant when I said to avoid somebody who has lower iman is not how it sounds at all. So of course there's nothing wrong with someone's iman fluctuating. It happens to everyone, regardless of how knowledgeable you are or how pious you might be. Everyone's iman fluctuates, and that's just part of being a human, part of being a Muslim. But I would always advise that you marry someone who you wish to improve with, not somebody who might bring you back. In this case, I would say don't marry someone who has the potential to be on the same spiritual level as you. I think you should find somebody who's already at that level and who you're already spiritually compatible with. I think it's always best to go with what is apparent and happening in the current time and place and how their deen is at this exact moment. And of course, inshallah, in the future it can only get better, it can get worse as well, but I would just go by what is apparent. Iman, aka faith, will be the foundation of your marriage, of your relationship, and it will dictate how you treat and respect each other and how you build a family and how you raise your children. So if a man does not have the deen that you're looking for, then treat that as the ultimate red flag. The second red flag I'm going to mention is sort of relevant to me as well, because this would be a red flag for me personally, and it is that he would be too much into his culture, to the extent where some of the cultural practices have infiltrated the religion of Islam, and there have become innovations within religion. It's just all sort of mixed up. I think it's just best to stay away from people who are too cultural in a bad way. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being cultural, of course everyone has the beauty of their cultures, but once culture comes in and affects someone's learning in Islam and affects their religion and their cultural values overtake Islam, then that is an extreme red flag. You need to cut it and just dead it. This isn't so much of a relevant example, but an example of this is in a lot of cultures, Arab, Asian, wherever you're from, it's usually, you know, the mum does everything for the sons. The boy then grows up to be a man who expects this from their wife. Essentially, you might just step into that role of mother while you're in a marriage, and perhaps even be a glorified maid. You want to have both people in the marriage understand their responsibilities and their roles within the marriage, and, you know, picking up after your husband. Of course there's barakah and there's ajr in that, but if that's how someone was raised and that's their expectations and you don't meet those expectations, not only is there going to be conflict, not only is there going to be an issue because this person belongs to a certain culture in which the mother does everything for them, literally everything for them, it's going to create a huge strain on your marriage. So you need a man who, well, I would suggest that you would need a man who is independent and at least knows how to cook and clean and do the basics for himself. And then the whole roles and responsibilities of a husband and wife come in later, and you discuss that between yourself, because obviously roles and responsibilities look a lot different depending on the couple. Modern Muslims might have the wife and the husband both working outside the house. Childcare might look different, where it's literally a 50-50 split due to the more feminist society that we live in. Or it could be the more traditional roles, like, you know, the husband going out to work, he's the one, he's a sole provider, the breadwinner, the wife stays at home and she's a stay-at-home mum, that sort of thing. So it's something that you need to negotiate and talk about before you get married. And if you're not happy with the answers, then take that as a red flag. The third red flag is if he treats his mahram women, so his mothers, sisters, aunties, poorly, particularly if he treats his mother poorly, because this woman has given birth to this boy, right? She carried him, looked after him, nurtured him, and if he's able to disrespect his mother, what on earth makes you think that he's going to treat you any better? If he's capable of mistreating his own mother and disrespecting his own mother and not caring or having ghira or jealousy or anything like that towards his own mother, what on earth makes you think that he's going to feel that way towards you? You also don't want a mummy's boy, someone who is solely looked after by their mum and lacks independence. Of course, in some cultures, like I was saying before, the mother loves to coddle the sons especially, and your man has to know his priorities when he marries you, and he needs to be a man when he marries you. You can't go into meeting somebody and see that they are coddled by their mum and they are babied by their mum, a grown 20-30-year-old man. It's a huge red flag if somebody is not independent. The fourth red flag, and this is a huge red flag, is if he demonstrates any sort of signs of abuse, or there's any indication of abusive tendencies. This can be any sort of abuse, but I'm guessing if you're still in the talking stage, or if you are like Islamically married with your nikah, just not living together during the whole halal dating thing, engagement period before the walima, it will probably be more verbal, emotional abuse that you could be victim of, whether that's manipulation, gaslighting, or somebody who just doesn't take accountability for their mistakes, who's unable to take criticism, and whenever there is a conflict, you're always the one to blame for all of the problems, who is either aggressive towards you once you've had conflict, or and wants to figure everything out there and then, who doesn't give you room to breathe, or someone who gives you the silent treatment. and just doesn't speak to you for days. Of course, there are certain situations where like both parties need to cool off, and maybe here and now is not the time or place to discuss things because things may have become heated, so you both do need time to cool down. So that sort of silent treatment, that's in my eyes, that's all right. Like, you both need to calm down. But if it's a thing where they literally just do not acknowledge that you exist anymore, then that is a huge red flag, and that is emotional abuse. Obviously, like I was mentioning before, anger or issues with controlling anger is a huge issue when it comes to meeting someone. Of course, it's hard to tell at the beginning, especially when it's just, you know, the families are involved, you've never really like spoken to this person one-on-one. But there are some situations where you've spoken to somebody during the whole courting period, and you know, you can see that they have some sort of anger problem, or they can't control themselves too quick, or they might get triggered too easily. But on the other side, you don't want someone who's completely apathetic and who almost feels nothing and doesn't get angry at all. It's also really important to acknowledge that if your partner has had an abusive upbringing or grew up in a toxic environment, in whatever regard, I think it's imperative to know how this has affected them and affected how they view people, view relationships, view parenting. And of course, I'm not saying that it's the potential husband's fault, of course not. They were only a child, they were only a teenager, or they were only an adult. They are the victim ultimately, but it's also sort of how they view the world now after having this tragic experience. How will he treat you as a wife? How will he treat your children growing up? What sort of parenting style will he now have based on whatever abuse, whether it's physical or verbal or anything like that? How will that affect how he will treat your potential children? And how will that affect you both raising your children? Because a big conflict when it comes to a couple parenting their children is like different parenting styles. Some people are real strict disciplinarians, whereas some people take a more gentle approach to parenting, and that's extremely important because you do not want to have conflicting parenting styles. Of course, everyone's going to have differences, but when it comes down to parenting styles, you both sort of need to come to a common ground, and that can be either a really amazing thing for your child, or parenting styles not being the same could be extremely detrimental to your child and can create confusion for that child. So I think it's really important that if you've had trauma yourself, it's not just about the husband having trauma. If you as a wife have experienced trauma yourself and you're going into seeking a partner for yourself, it's also important that you've acknowledged and registered your own triggers or your own issues surrounding this sort of abuse growing up. But equally, it's also as important that your partner has done the same. If you both have unresolved traumas and feelings towards whatever has happened to you growing up in society, at school, at home, all of that pressure and build up can come into a marriage and really infiltrate that marriage and affect the way you communicate and argue and resolve conflict. Also, I just really want to say, please do not marry somebody with the intention of fixing them. It is not your job as a spouse to fix your partner. So please don't go into a marriage meeting thinking, oh okay, he's had all these problems before, you know, he could be this really great man if only he had just addressed these. Like, you're not a therapist. You don't need to go into somebody's life and try and fix them. Do not try and fix somebody. You're supposed to be building a life together. You don't need to fix it first. The fifth red flag is poor communication skills and having a lack of emotional intelligence. I put these two together because I think that they go hand in hand. If your husband is unable to express how he feels about certain issues or things that might have happened to him at work that day, or things that just generally bother him, you might find yourself constantly assuming things have happened or like extracting words from him. It just leaves you assuming a lot and having very little insight as to what your partner is feeling. And that comes down to not only lacking an understanding emotional intelligence from the other person, but it comes down to an issue with expressing yourself. When you're in a marriage, you need to know how to express yourself to your partner. It's a teamwork effort, you know, it's a marriage, you're a partnership. You have to be able to express and talk to your partner about how you are, how you're feeling that day. You know, when it comes down to difficulty with communication, a lot of assumptions can be made, and where there's conflict and there's no resolution, Shaitan can really get in there, put himself in the middle of a marriage and create a lot of fitna within that marriage, where something little could spiral into a huge argument. A couple needs to be extremely clear and direct with one another of course the manner in which you go about this should be sensitive and loving at the same time. I mean, women generally tend to have more emotional intelligence anyway. Of course, there are certain isolated situations where that might not be the case. Emotional intelligence will make your life so much easier. It will make your life so much easier. Just being able to, you know, you've had a long day, you've had a nasty day at work or whatever, just going to unload on somebody and them having them to unload on you, it just relieves a lot of stress and also builds that emotional intimacy, which I think is extremely important in a marriage. Not only does it show that they're not dismissive or neglectful, but it also is a good insight as to how they might be as a father, because if a father is emotionally intelligent, they'll be emotionally available for your children, they will be supportive and understanding and caring towards your future children. So if he's there for your emotional needs, you can be almost certain that they will also do the same for your children. And it's really sad because a lot of cultures have taught men to be like these dismissive people who don't cry, don't show emotion, who are pretty closed up, like no empathy, none of that. But having said that, like the greatest man in our history, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the man. Like, he was firm when he needed to be, you know, he led wars and he led households, but he was also soft and sympathetic when he also needed to be too, with his family, with his companions, with his friends. Honestly, I feel like a lack of emotional intelligence can lead to either the success of a marriage or the complete failure of a marriage due to the repercussions that it can have, and not feeling like you're heard, feeling alone. The sixth red flag I want to touch upon is the differences in personality. This one is not too much of a red flag. It could just simply be that you're two different people, you've had two different upbringings, you just have different personalities. But if his personality is too different to yours and he's unwilling to change or modify certain behaviors in certain ways, or do things because you like them or not do things because you dislike them, then I feel like that can be a little red flag as well, in the case that there needs to be some sort of leeway or compromise within a marriage. Like I said, it's not the fault of anyone. It could be that you two are just not compatible, but I also don't want you to be in a position where you might be feeling desperate and you think, okay, this is my shot to get married, let me just do it. Because again, I don't want you to regret something later down the line. And it's really easy, like at the start of a marriage, during the honeymoon phase, it's easier to overlook a lot of someone's mistakes or shortcomings. But the longer you're married, when you grow out of the honeymoon phase, I know not everyone grows out of the honeymoon phase, but for most of us, you grow out of the honeymoon phase and, you know, life becomes more ordinary. Life is, you know, repetitive and more mundane, and you begin to realize that this person actually needs to fix something about themselves because it is affecting your marriage. So reality does set in, and you know, certain things like you could be a clean person or he could be quite a messy person and leave stuff on the floor, leave stuff laying around. These little things can just build up and just create huge explosions within a relationship because they're not being addressed. And if you've already told this person that you don't like certain things, they continue to do it, it's headache. It is a headache. So if someone is unwilling to change or isn't compromising on certain things, then that can also be seen as a red flag. Also though, opposites do attract. However, likeness also attracts. I think in both cases there will always be a downfall. If you're too opposite to each other, you might not be able to relate to each other. If you're too similar to each other, things might get a bit too boring. And so I think, what I always say anyway, is if your fundamental values are the same, your Islamic fundamental values are the same, the values you want to instill within your family, the values that you hold in life, the goals that you aspire to achieve in life, if those fundamental values are the same, then that is an amazing foundation for the start and continuation of your marriage. Obviously it doesn't mean it's going to be the case in all circumstances, but I think it's a great way to start and just work from there. The seventh red flag is somebody who wants you to complete them. Somebody who thinks that you are their everything and who is sort of a yes man, sweet talking yes man. Yeah, it sounds lovely at the beginning, it sounds romantic at the beginning, but the more I think about it, if you are someone's everything, then you can't give them anything else. Like, they can't get anything else from anywhere else. So I think it's actually quite a dangerous thought. This is not advice just for the husband, this is also advice for you as a sister, as the wife going into a marriage. You cannot make somebody your everything. You can only feel that way really towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he can give you everything. Another human is always going to fail you. They will always fall short in some way. And so if you put them in this pedestal, they fail you, all of these expectations are just going to come crashing down and you're just going to be left with disappointment. So don't be too naive. Somebody cannot be your everything. It literally isn't possible. And so I think it's extremely important that you don't make someone else your whole world. Like, you've got to have your own world first. You've got to have your relationship with Allah first, and the marriage comes together. I'm sure we've all seen the triangle where it's Allah at the top and the husband and the wife at the bottom. You can't be each other's everything. You can only get to Allah at the top. Allah is your everything. Okay? Also, just like highlighting on what I was saying about the yes man. A man needs to lead, okay? The man should be the one leading the marriage. And if you don't have a strong man within that marriage, you have a pushover, a yes man, it might not be the most successful marriage to be in, because the husband is the head of the household. Whether you want to hear it or not, that is just how it should be Islamically. Now, that doesn't say that you have any less value. That doesn't mean you have any less value. That doesn't mean that you are, well, unequal. Men and women are unequal anyway, but that's a whole other topic. It's about fairness and justice within a marriage. In an Islamic household, the man should be the leader, like we've seen with the Prophet and his family. No one is miserable. It's only society saying that women have to be not even at the same level as men, but they need to be above men now. It's just society telling you that you're not happy. The 8th red flag is somebody who lacks ambition, whether that is in religion or in his career. You need to ask yourself, if he lacks ambition in his career, how is that going to reflect in his religion, and vice versa? Is that going to be him then going on to improve himself, or is it going to be his ultimate destruction because he's just going to stay stagnant his whole life? And it also goes on to show how he will be in your marriage. Is he going to work hard to have a successful marriage with you? And leading on to my next point is, does he have a job? You can't really, depending on age obviously and personal circumstance, if you get married young, you probably don't have a career yet, both of you. But if you're marrying someone who's a bit older, or you're older in age and you're looking to get married, it's important that you have somebody who has a stable job and is able to provide for your family. Of course, the ultimate provider is Allah, and he is always going to be the provider for you, and your husband is the means in which you get it, but you also need to tie your camel. The last red flag, the 10th red flag, is if he wants to know a little bit too much about your financial situation. Your money is your money as a woman. If you have a halal job, you work in a school or in healthcare, your money is your money. He doesn't need to know about your money, really, does he? And so if he's a little bit too nosy about your money, I think that might be a red flag. Or if he's a bit too evasive regarding his income and what he brings to the table, because as a Muslim woman, you need to rely on your husband to be the provider. And that can't really happen if he's hiding things, especially things like finances. Anyway, I think I'm going to end the video there, because those are my 10 red flags. There are loads more, especially ones that are tailored to certain circumstances, but I'll leave it there. If you have any further red flags, please leave them in the comments down below, inshallah. I hope this video has been helpful in some way, and I will see you in my next video. Assalamu Alaikum.